Today's webinar. It's the next webinar in our series with the South Jersey Cultural Alliance. I believe this is the 9th webinar in the series, believe it or not. We've been doing these for quite some time, which is kind of amazing if you think about it. 9 webinars that we've done over the course of the last like 8, 9, 10 months or so. Hopefully you guys are getting a lot of use out of those. I highly encourage you to go back and watch some of those previous ones, especially after you listen to today. So today we're going to be talking about donor loyalty, turning one-time donors into long-term loyal donors. And this is one of the webinars I get really excited about because it really starts to draw on a lot of what we've been discussing so far. It brings in aspects of your website, of your email marketing, of your online fundraising in general, and it kind of starts blending all of these into some pretty high-level strategies. And I don't want to get you scared too early on, but we're going to be talking about some of those high-level strategies. Some of this is going to take a little more work, a little more thought than maybe some of the other webinars that we've had. But of course, there's still going to be some strategies that you can jump in there and implement right away. So let's go ahead and jump in and get going. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, just type them into the chat box, and I will try to be monitoring that as we go. My name is Rich Dietz. I'm the founder of a small company called Nonprofit R&D. That's how I met Olga at the South Jersey Cultural Alliance and started doing this webinar series with them. And I've recently accepted a position with a software company called Abila, and I'm a senior product manager there of their digital fundraising. And I do a lot of thought leadership and speaking and training, as well as working on their online fundraising products there as well. The only thing I'd point out on my background really when I do this is talk about I've been in the nonprofit sector pretty much my entire career, over 20 years of experience kind of working in nonprofits as well as working for nonprofits on the technology side. So whenever I'm speaking about technology, teaching or training about technology, I try to keep in mind what the situation most nonprofits find themselves in. That's no staff, no time, no budget, and you're told to do all these amazing things with technology, and you're like, yeah, right, I can't afford to do that. So I do try to focus on strategies that you can implement right away, at least some strategies you can implement right away. Some of the things we talk about today is going to take a little more time, a little more thinking, but we'll definitely focus on some of those that you can put in there right away. So what are we going to talk about today? So today we're going to talk about donor loyalty, but we're going to do it in a slightly different way, and that is we're going to talk by starting out by talking about moves management. You may have heard a little bit about what moves management is, sort of in the offline world, usually with major donors. So we're going to talk about that in general. We're going to talk about data, and then we're going to talk about how you can actually implement some of these moves management concepts online. And it's what I really like to think about when I look at donor loyalty and donor engagement and what donors really want from the organizations that they support, and how you can do some of these things online. So our goal today is really to get you to think differently about moves management. And if you're doing moves management, then we want to talk about how to do it online. If you don't really know that much about moves management, then we're going to give you a quick little crash course in it and then show you some ideas of how you can actually do that more online. And I will start by saying that this is not easy. Doing moves management, doing some of the things we're talking about today is not some of the simpler strategies and tactics that we go out there, but they are vital to your long-term existence. There was a great article in the Nonprofit Times, and they had a quote in there called, "There's no doubt that you'll need to work harder than ever to cultivate strong relationships with your constituents if you're going to compete effectively for donor dollars." And in this article, they talked about how it really is a competition. There's a lot of nonprofits, there's a lot of organizations, arts organizations, museums, theaters, art galleries, all of that stuff. You guys are really all competing for people's, at the very least, their attention, but also their money with donations and their attendance at your event. So there is a competition there. And the organizations that are really going to stand out are the ones that are going to really focus on building these strong relationships. And moves management with a strong CRM or constituent relationship management or a donor database was identified as one of the best ways to do that. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how can you build these relationships in a more systematic way instead of just sending out a monthly newsletter and hoping that people connect with you in some way. Now, while this is not easy, you actually have to do it. You have to actually start. Now, there is no right way to do this, so don't spend the next 4 or 5 months studying moves management and trying to figure out what the best thing to do is. You really have to jump in there and do it. But with that in mind, you also have to tailor this to your organization. So a lot of the strategies I'm going to give you today are some general best practices. We'll talk about what I mean by best practices in a moment. You definitely need to take what I talk about today and then see which pieces fit your organization. You need to start where you are and build on it. And then I get to bring in one of my favorite quotes, which is a Chinese proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So if you haven't been doing moves management, and especially doing it online for the last 20 years, well, then today is the perfect day to start doing that. And when I talk about tailoring it to your organization, what I really mean is taking some of what we talk about today, best practice. I'm going to be talking a lot about best practices, right? And I talk about that a lot. And if you've been on any of the previous webinars, you've probably seen this slide. What's a best practice to me? A best practice is what works in your organization. Just because it works for some other organization down the street, just because I say it's a best practice, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for your organization. You have to try it. You have to test it out. And so again, today I'm going to be presenting you with a buffet of strategies. I'm going to give you a bunch of strategies, a bunch of tactics. It's up to you to kind of go up to that buffet and figure out what are the best strategies for you to test and try and implement right now. And if they work, you keep doing them. If they don't work, you go back and you try a couple other best strategies, best practices. But remember, the best practice is just the place to start. And that is where we are going to start right now. So let's jump into moves management. And so, we're going to start with a very quick definition of what is moves management. According to Wikipedia, the process by which a prospective donor is moved from cultivation to solicitation. That is, letting them get to know you and then getting them to actually donate some money. So the moves in moves management are the actions an organization takes in order to develop those relationships, in order to create those strong bonds and eventually get them to donate. It's often credited as the inventor of this, or the person who first developed this concept, is David Dunlop from Cornell University. And he had a really interesting way that he talked about what the purpose of moves management, and the quote's right there, changing people's attitudes so they want to give. And I think that that's a very important distinction. And we're going to talk about donor loyalty in a little bit, and my thoughts on the difference between donor loyalty and donor retention. But the key here is really changing people's attitudes so they want to give. You want them to be so excited that they want to give you money. They want to donate. They want to attend your events. They want to do more with your organization. And we got to talk. And then what we're going to talk about today is how to change people's attitudes. And changing their attitudes isn't a negative thing. It's actually a positive thing. It's helping them get to know you and all of that sort of stuff. So why do we focus on moves management? Why has moves management been a big deal in the nonprofit space? Now, mostly with major donors. It creates you get more donation dollars, more sustainable funding. You get your long-term donors. You get multiple donations by developing those relationships. You get stronger relationships with your supporters. You get them more involved, create those stronger bonds, and you get more engagement. That's word of mouth. That's peer-to-peer fundraising. That's them talking about you on social media. All of the things that you really want from your supporters. You don't just want a check or an online donation from your supporters. You actually want them talking about you. You want them attending events. You want them telling their friends and family how awesome you are. That is where your organization really gets a bump, and you can actually move the needle much more. So that's why moves management is important. And so what are these moves? So when we talk about moves management, what do we mean by a move? Well, Dunlop says a move is a series of actions to develop each prospect. And you need to move your prospects through this funnel. You need to start by making them aware of your organization. If they don't even know who you are, first you have to let them know who you are. Then you give them knowledge of your organization. You teach them who you are, what you do, why it's important. We've talked a lot about that when we talk about storytelling. We talk about getting into the why of what you do. Then you got to get them interested in, so not only just knowing who you are and a little bit about what you do, but actually they have some interest in what you're doing. You then get them involved, so some way to get them to kind of raise their hand and say, I'm even more than interested now, I'm ready to do something. And that could be as small as talking about you on social media, all the way up to attending an event, to volunteering with your organization. You get that involvement. Once you get that involvement, then you get the commitment to the institution and its mission. And that commitment is where you get the donation dollars, and you get not only that first donation, but you get multiple donations moving forward. So the actions are dependent on your organization and practice. So this is generally how you want to move a donor through the process. What what happens in each of those steps is really dependent on your organization, your practices, what type of donors you have, what type of events you might run, all of that. So you kind of have to fill in those gaps a little bit based on your organization there. And when you're thinking about those moves, there's some really important key concepts that you need to think about. And we've talked about some of these in some of the previous webinars, but I definitely want to highlight them here. Each of these moves should be donor-centered. That means tailored to the donor, and that is focusing on what the donor wants. Now, we've talked about this a lot when we talk about, what do donors want from the organizations they support. The Community Philanthropy 2.0 survey asked donors, what do you want to hear more about from the organizations you support? The number one thing they wanted to hear about was impact. So we definitely want to be letting our donors know the impact that you're making with those donations or with your programs in the community, all of that sort of stuff. So donor-centered, really thinking about it from the donor's point of view. Next is strategic. Focus on actions that increase engagement, understanding, and involvement. So don't just send out a monthly newsletter because that really isn't focusing on each of those different moves. It really isn't focusing on a strategic plan. It's just throwing a bunch of content out there. Instead, think about your emails in a much more strategic way. Give them what they're looking for. Show impact. Invite them to talk about you on social media. Do things that actually get them to take actions, and we're going to talk more about those when we get to the strategy section for sure. Next is document it. You need to be tracking and measuring these moves because you got to find out what are the moves, what are the actions, what are the strategies and tactics that work, and what are the ones that don't work. That's why I talked about the buffet. You need to try out some strategies, document what you tried, and then document the results. If you start sending out shorter emails talking about impact, did that increase your opens? Did that increase click-throughs? Did it increase donations? If it didn't, then try something else. If it does, you want to write that down and be like, this is a strategy that's working with our folks. We got to document it, and especially not just for yourself, but say you're no longer with the organization or someone else leaves your organization. You don't want all that institutional knowledge leaving with them, so we want to make sure that we document that so we all have that. And finally, tailored. And I've said this a number of times already, but you need to make sure it fits with your organization, your processes, and the data that you have available. We have a whole section where we're going to talk about data here in a second, so just hold on there. So definitely have to tailor it to your organization. So now, as I mentioned, a lot of this moves management talk has really been in the offline world. It's really been focused all around major donors, and you take a major donor out to coffee and do all that stuff. And so this is a point where usually someone says, wait a second, oh, I'm sorry. So the big goal with all this moves management is what the title of the presentation, turn one-time donors into long-term loyal donors, and donor loyalty is really the key. So what I was saying about the offline versus online, this is where someone usually says, hey, why is the online fundraising guy talking about moves management? And really traditionally, yes, moves management has focused on major giving. It's really been focused on that one-on-one relationship, taking a major donor out to coffee, taking him out to lunch, having them come and visit your organization, maybe getting them to volunteer or come to one of your events and buy a table and do that sort of stuff. Now, that's easier to do with major donors because there's a high return on investment, and it's only a handful of major donors that you're focusing on. Traditionally, this was very difficult to do or impossible to do with smaller donors. You can't take all of your $50 donors out to coffee. You can't take all of your $100 donors out to lunch. You would be just doing that 24/7. You would never get it done. However, we can start doing some of these moves online using tools like email analytics and our donor database. And when I talk about online fundraising, if you've heard any of my previous webinars, you know that online fundraising is not a donate button. Online fundraising is really engaging with your supporters online and finding ways to get them involved, to get them to take small actions, communicate with them exactly what they want, and do it in a really tailored way that they feel special. So we can do some of these moves online. So moves management online, you can do it all. You can do it online. So you got to start thinking about, so we can't, like I said earlier, we can't do online stuff one-on-one. We can't, email each of our donors individually one-on-one. So we do have to do some mass emailing. We do have to do some grouping of them and all that. So we need to create these online moves. They have to be more experiences or touch points. And so what I like to do is focus more on groups of supporters. So we can take all of our end-of-year donors and communicate with them in a certain way. We can take our $500 or higher donors, communicate with them maybe in a different way, send them a different set of views. So this is really where the segmentation comes in. So you can actually group them. So you treat a group of people like you would an individual almost. We can create profiles based on your best online givers, and this is something that I really, really like to do, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the data section, but just to give you a little spoiler here, what's really nice to do is go look at who is your perfect donor, who is your perfect patron, perfect donor, perfect supporter of your organization. What do? They attend events, they donate 2 to 3 times a year, they talk about you on social media, right? You create this profile of your perfect donor, right? Then you try to figure out how can I get more people to look like that perfect donor. So if it's that they attend 2 events a year or come to 2 performances a year, then how can you get people to come to at least 2 performances a year? Is it that they talk about you on social media? How can you convince people to talk about you on social media? So you try to get people to become that A+ donor, that perfect donor of yours by taking the actions and moving them towards that better profile. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next section as we start to get into the data. So if you're really going to do moves management, and if you're really going to do moves management online, you really need to start collecting better data on your visitors, on your supporters, and especially on your donors. So the first thing is you need to understand your donors. Now, in the offline world, when we did moves management, that was really focused on major donors. We would take them to coffee, we would have conversations, they would tour the facility, we'd gather data on the individual, we would take notes, we'd enter those notes into your donor database, and then you could create some moves based on that information. And you really had a really detailed view of who these people were, you understood them, you really got to know them as people, so you knew what their hot buttons were, you knew what was going to get them motivated to give and what was going to get them motivated to give at a higher level. As we said earlier, you can't do that with all of your online donors because you just don't have the time, and the online donors tend to be the smaller donors, $100, $200, maybe up to $500 or so. So online, we need to start thinking about them as groups or segments. And we can really use this data and these online actions to better understand them, track and gather the online actions. So we really have to segment and create profiles of those top donors like I was just talking about where we can create that profile of who our perfect A+ donor is, and then we start grouping people to try to get them to look more like that person, get them to attend more events, get them to talk about you on social media. Whatever it is that profile looks like, you reverse engineer that and you start figuring that out. So in order to do this, we really have to have data, and data is really the key to understanding your donors, especially if we're going to be grouping and segmenting them into groups in order to communicate with them. So the step one is evaluate your current data. So what data do you have now? Is this data useful to meet your goals, and what other data do you need to reach your goals? Now, the next 5 or 6 slides, we're going to talk about some different data points that you should be collecting, and much of it you probably are already collecting in some way, but then you have to start thinking about what to do with it. And the key data that we really want to look at here is what we call predictive data. And that is data that you can use to make decisions to try and figure out how people are going to act, how people are going to react. And again, it's all about reverse engineering that perfect donor. But once you figure out these data points, you can then start grouping constituents and then interact with those groups. So let's get into what some of the data points that I think you should be collecting. Number one, email. I think email is the number one most important piece of data that you could possibly get. If you're going to be doing online moves at all, you have to have that email address. So you want to get email address any way you can. With the email address, you can follow up, engage with them online. You can gather additional data. So we've talked about this when we talked about online fundraising, is you don't need to ask every single question on your online registration form for your next event. You can just get that email address, the basic information you need, then you can always follow up with them and can gather more data. With an email address, you can continue engage with them over the long term. You can get them to take more of those actions, and you can actually move them through the moves management funnel that Dunlop talked about earlier. And then almost all of the strategies we talk about later are going to be involved with having that email address in some way. So next, we're going to go into some other data points. Of course, you want to have biographical information, as much biographical information as you can on your donors, because that's going to help you segment them. That's going to help you put them into different groups to help try and create that profile of your perfect donor. And a lot of this information you probably already have. If they've taken any sort of actions online, like donate, register, attended any of your events or anything like that, you probably have a lot of that information, their address, their location. But you got to actually try and dig a little bit deeper and try and get into some of those relationships. Gender might be important for your organization, depending on what it is. What interests? Interests is going to be very important as we start to get into the segmenting. And what I mean by interests is, what actually gets them to open an email, what gets them to click through, what gets them to actually attend an event. Are they concerned with women's issues? If they come to a women's only artist showing or something like that, they might be more susceptible to targeting mailings about women's type issues, and so you can mark that as an interest. Anything that they show an acclivity for, you can mark that as an interest, and then you can start grouping those people and communicating with them in a very special way. Also, donation information. If you're taking any sort of online donations, even paper donations, you probably have a lot of this information somewhere in your systems. And that is, what is the donation type? Money? Was it a cash donation, a check? Was it credit card? In kind? Was it one-time gift? Was it a recurring gift? Total donation amount, number of donations, all of these different things. So you probably have all of this. You probably haven't been thinking about how to actually use it, though. And some of the ways you can really use this is you can start looking at things like number of donations. How many times has somebody donated? If somebody's donated just one time, they're not a very good long-term loyal donor. If they've donated 4 or 5 times, that is actually much better. And then you can look and see what got someone to donate 4 or 5 times, then try and figure out how you can get other people to do the same thing. Looking at average gift size, you can actually start tracking if the average gift size is going up for a certain individual or if it's starting to trail off, and then you can try and dissect what we can do to get those average gift size up. Frequency and recency. I also talked about what programs they supported. If someone has donated to a girls after school program, again, you can target that as an interest. They may be more interested in girls issues. They may be interested in after school issues. You can target that as an interest and then start following up with them. So just donation information has a lot of information that you can use to start segmenting and grouping your supporters as well. Email list data. So if you use any sort of email marketing program, MailChimp, Constant Contact, anything like that, you're going to have a bunch of data in your email program, and the join date and the longevity that they've been on the list. How long have they been on the list? You'll probably find that your better donors or patrons, the ones that have been with you for a long time, have been on your list for a long time. So we obviously want to make sure we get more people on our list and develop them with that way. You can also look at the email engagement, the opens and the clicks and the actions. And when I talk about email, and if you've been on the previous webinars where I did talk about email, I am less concerned with opens than I am with click-throughs. Opens don't really mean much to me. Just because someone opened an email doesn't tell me much about them, but if somebody clicks through on a link, that tells me much more. What link did they click? How often do they click on links? That's information that I can then use to segment and start communicating and giving them more of the content that they actually want. Social data. Social data is another one that you may want to start looking at depending on your organization. This is one that I know that it freaks people out a little bit because it sounds scary of all this social data is out there and how do I track it all. Well, you can start just very simply by just tracking who's talking about you online. Who's liking your pages, who has commented on your Facebook page, who has tweeted anything out about your organization, and then marking those folks as being active, talking about you on social media. It's a little bit harder to track and organize this, but if you have a younger audience or you're moving into the social media field, this would be a good thing to start tracking in your donor database, which we'll be talking about in a moment as well. Now beyond those basic ones, there's actually more data points. You can get as many data points as you want, and the richer profiles you can build of your patrons, of your supporters, the easier it is for you going to be to follow up with them in the right way, to segment them into the groups that are meaningful to them, and communicate them with the information they need. And so some of the ways you can get those richer profiles of your patrons, your donors, your supporters is surveys, petitions, and polls. You can simply ask them for the extra information you need. So if you're having a live event, you can have a survey there, and everyone who fills out the survey gets entered into the drawing for the free whatever it is that you're going to be giving away. You can do the same thing online, get people to fill out surveys and petitions and polls. And again, that's all extra information that you can add into their profiles. You can also do append data, and append data, if you don't know, is where you can pay for a service that will actually help fill out your donor profiles for you. And these services, you give them a list of names and email addresses and addresses, all the information you have on potential donors. You send it to them. They run it through 10, 15, 20 different databases, and then they send you back a profile with updated information. And the new services out there can even update it with employer, can update it with social media profiles, can update it with giving history. There's all kinds of stuff that you can add into those donor profiles. So obviously you don't want to start there because it is a service that costs a fee. But as you start to really get into doing these online moves, you'll realize you need some richer data, and then you might want to start looking at getting an append to your database and getting a richer profile, getting some extra information and data there. So other data points, again, be creative. What makes the most sense for your organization, for your programs? What other data do you need to track? Number of performances they attended, type of performances that they attended, what art shows did they come to, all of that stuff. That could be information that is valuable to you building that donor profile and trying to move more people towards it. So you just have to kind of be creative there, think through what makes the most sense for your organization. So now we have all this great data, right? So what do we do with all this data? Well, data is like herding cats. If you've ever heard the term of herding cats, it's nearly impossible to herd cats. Trying to pull all this data together and analyze it and review it is near impossible as well. So you probably need more than Excel to do this. Many of the organizations I work with are still using Excel spreadsheets, and they have a spreadsheet for their event attendees, and they have a spreadsheet of their donors, and they have a spreadsheet of their major donors, and all of that stuff. If you really want to get into doing moves management, if you really want to get into doing online moves management, you really need to start thinking about using a CRM or a donor database. CRM is a constituent relationship management database, or just a donor database. It's a way to actually start gathering all this information, creating those rich profiles. And it gets really interesting when you start filling out your donor database and really having information in there. One, it'll vastly improve your major giving programs, because if you're going to go meet with a major donor, you can look them up in your database and you have a snapshot of everything about them. All of the contacts you've had with them, who's talked to them, what they've said, what their interests are. Again, that's where most folks really think about this moves management, is with the major donors, and they really use their donor database for that. But we can actually do the same thing online, because we can actually start thinking about how to score our donors. And what I mean by this is, and I've talked about it a couple times already today, we basically use the data to create the ideal loyal donor. So again, we look at who our perfect donors are, our favorite donors, the ones that we rely on year in and year out, and then we try to create this profile of what makes them so amazing. How many events they attend, what do they say about us, where do they talk about us, what do they do, how do they act, what do they look like, what biographical information do they look like. We create this profile of a great loyal donor, and then we start thinking about how to move more of our donors towards that model. And whether that's to attend more events, or sign up for our newsletter, or talk about us on social media, become a peer-to-peer fundraiser, whatever that is. And that's where it gets really, really powerful. And we're going to talk about some more of those online moves here in a little bit as we get into the actual strategy section. But the most important thing here is to take action. Data is meaningless without action. I have worked with quite a few organizations that had done a really good job of collecting data, and they had pretty good, rich profiles of their donors, but then they really didn't do anything else with it. They just kind of had a database, and they would look somebody up and see everything about them, and they didn't really do anything with it. So the key is to really take action, to to actually do something with this data as you start to collect it. And that leads us right into some of the actions that I want you to take. So now we're going to start talking about the online moves, and this is where we really get into the meat of it. So now that we talked about what moves are, what moves management is, we talked about some of the data that you want to start looking at. Now, what do we do with all of that? Well, the key for me, you've probably heard me say this in previous webinars, the focus online or with any sort of fundraising is donor engagement and donor loyalty. All of your moves should be focused on increasing both of these, and engagement leads to donor loyalty. Engagement means getting them involved. So what do we mean by engaged donors? Engaged donors are those that are taking actions. They donate, they attend events, they volunteer, they recruit new donors, they talk about you on social media. We know from the research it is way more cost effective to renew a donor than to find a new donor. We're going to talk about that a little bit when we get into donor loyalty. And engaged donors just do more. Engaged donors make your job easier. Engaged donors make your job more fun. They give more frequent donations, larger donations, they take more actions, they tell people about your organization. This is where they make your job easier. They're actually out there marketing for you. They're telling their friends and family. They're so excited about what they're doing with the organization or what your organization is doing, what you guys have going on in the community, what performances you have coming up. That's the word of mouth marketing, and that is where you create these loyal donors. Once they're out there talking about you, they're almost kind of on the hook to support you at that point because they've become an advocate, a fan. Those are the ones that become loyal donors. So we get them to get engaged. That leads us to the most important thing, which is donor loyalty. I define donor loyalty as the ongoing process of engaging with your donors so that they contribute with donations and time to your organization over the long term. Now, you've probably heard in the industry that this is called donor retention. I don't like the term donor retention. I'm a social worker by trade. I have a master's in social work. And to me, donor retention sounds like I've taken my donors, locked them in a cage, and thrown them in the basement. So I don't want to retain donors. I actually want to create loyal donors because loyal donors come back because they want to. Remember that definition earlier from Dunlop where he says that they get them to where they want to participate, they want to give. That's what donor loyalty is all about. It's getting them to want to come back, then they're excited, and they're more likely to tell their friends and family. Retained people maybe aren't as excited, less likely to tell friends and family about your organization, about your events, about all the cool stuff that you have going on. So the key here, when you're thinking about donor loyalty, the key is really to think about lifetime value of the donor. That first gift, the first time they give, is almost meaningless in comparison to the value of what they could bring to you over the long term if you engage them and turn them into a loyal donor. So why is donor loyalty so important? Number one, it's an easy way to stand out from the crowd. Many organizations, and arts organizations in particular, are not really focusing on donor loyalty or patron loyalty or even event attendee loyalty. They're just trying to every month they're just trying to get more people to come to their event or try and get more people to donate. They're not really thinking through some of the strategies that we're going to talk about today. Secondly, it is vital for the long-term health of your organization. Adrian Sargent, who's kind of known as the grandfather of donor retention, he calls it donor retention. Again, I like donor loyalty. But he's done a lot of research in this realm, and what he's found is that currently nonprofits have a 60% attrition rate of donors. That means they are losing 60% of their donors year over year. So if you got 100 donors today, in 5 years, only one of those donors is still supporting your organization. That's a scary, scary statistic. That is called churn. That means every year you're going out trying to have to fill all those people dropping off the donor roles or the patron roles or the event attendee roles. You're always having to find new ones, and we know it's more expensive to find those new donors than it is to find than it is to get your current donors to give again. So if we focus on those donor loyalty strategies, we can have huge improvements. In fact, Sargent has found that if you have a 10% improvement in your attrition, that means you go from 60% attrition to 50% attrition, it can create a 200% increase in the projected value of your donor database. So small improvements to your donor loyalty can have a huge impact on your bottom line in the future, especially years 2, 3, 4, 5 as you go down. Furthermore, there's some really cool real-life examples, and one of my favorites is from the New Jersey Institute of Technology. They definitely did a good job focusing on lifetime value of the donor. They had a gentleman that graduated from the engineering school at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. He and his wife made a donation every year to the school. They wrote a check for $25. $25 every year, $25, 20, 30 years they did this. The school did a great job of keeping them involved, keeping them engaged, giving them the alumni newsletter, inviting them to events, little things. Obviously, they're not treating them like a major donor because, $25 a year, you're really not going to be able to spend that much time with them. However, at the end of their life, when the couple passed away, they made a $5 million donation to the New Jersey Institute of Technology. So even though they were only giving a $25 donation, they had at least $5 million sitting in the bank and ready to give. And just by cultivating that donor and giving them the information that they needed, keeping them connected with the school, they were able to get a large gift at the very end there. So again, just a real life example of why you want to be thinking about doing these moves online and not treating, not just focusing on your major donors, but focusing on some of those smaller donors, doing it with some of the online strategies that we're going to be talking about next. So we talked earlier about, you can't take all of your $100 donors or all of your $25 donors, as we just talked about, out to coffee and out to lunch and all that stuff. So what can we do with them specifically online to keep them engaged and to turn them into these loyal donors? Well, the first thing you can do is mind the gap, and that is to be thinking about what's called the engagement gap. And the engagement gap is the gap between a first-time donor and an engaged donor. Again, this is that A-plus profile that we were talking about creating earlier. What is the difference between a first-time donor and that profile you created earlier of your perfect donor, right? What is that gap? And what can you do to shrink that gap? What can you do to get somebody to pass through that gap? The best way to get them to pass through that gap, and we alluded to this earlier, is to give them a graduated offering of actions. We know that if we want to get them to that A-plus donor profile, to make them look more like that, we have to engage them. Well, what is the things that we need to do to engage them? You want to create a graduated offering of actions, and that is starting with small, simple actions like forward this email, like us on Facebook, watch this video, check out this new program that we have. You start with small actions and then slowly move them up to larger actions like attending an event, volunteering, doing peer-to-peer fundraising, donating a second time, those sort of things. But you don't just start with the, hey, give us money, right? Or, hey, come to an event. You want to start with some smaller actions that are much easier for them to complete. If we get them to complete those small actions, they're more likely to complete the medium actions. If they complete the medium actions, they're more likely to complete the larger actions that we talked about before. So really start mapping out what are those little small moves that you can get them to do in the beginning that really start to develop that relationship, start to develop that sort of engagement with them. And the strategies we talk about moving forward are going to help you do exactly that. One of the very first ones you should be doing is a welcome series. A welcome series is nothing but a series of emails that automatically get sent out by your email provider when somebody takes an action. So when someone signs up your email list or when someone donates, you can use your email service provider, whether you use Informs or Constant Contact or MailChimp or whatever you use. You can set up what's called an autoresponder series, where you can say when someone donates, I want to automatically send them this email on day 1. I want to send another email on day 3, another email on day 7, another email on day 10. And so this series is a bunch of emails that get sent out automatically over a pretty short period of time that lets them get to know your organization more and lets them engage. It gets them to do these small favors for you. So you may send out an email talking about a success story. Then you send out an email talking about some of your upcoming events. Another one that talks about some of your programs you have in the community. Another one that highlights a staff member or highlights an artist or highlights one of your performers, something like that. It's a series of emails that lets them get to know you and gets them to take those small actions. Now at this point I usually get someone saying, oh my gosh, if I send out all these emails in such a short period of time after someone donates or signs up, they're going to be upset and they're going to unsubscribe. That's actually not the case. Welcome series emails, Experian Marketing did a study on this. this with their clients. They found that Welcome Series emails get 4 times more opens and 5 times more clicks than your regular email blast. So that's more than your monthly newsletter. People are ignoring your monthly newsletter, but when they sign up for an email list or they've just donated, they're really excited about your organization. It's probably the most excited that they're going to be because they're like, hey, send me more information. And then if they have to wait 4 weeks for your next monthly newsletter to come out, or however many weeks it is to your next monthly newsletter to come out, they've kind of lost that excitement. They may even have forgotten why they've signed up. So a Welcome Series allows you to get more engagement, to get more information, more knowledge. Remember back to Dunlop's stages. We first have to get them interested, then we have to give them knowledge as the second move that we really need to do. A Welcome Series really helps you get that knowledge in there. Next, let's see, it's a way to increase your touch points, lets folks get to know you, all that stuff gets you to do small favors. So a Welcome Series I highly recommend. That's a really good one. We actually did a webinar for South Jersey Cultural Alliance all about how to create a Welcome Series. So you can go back to that earlier webinar if you want on the resources page on the South Jersey Cultural Alliance website. Next is communication. We also want to go beyond the welcome and thank you series and actually communicate with them. And we want to engage with them on a regular basis with great content. And this can be done via email, via social media, video, live events, etc. There's a concept in the marketing world called the 7 touches. And what it says in the marketing world is a customer needs at least 7 touches before they're comfortable making a buying decision. It's exactly the same thing in the nonprofit or the art space. It's very unlikely the first time somebody hears about you that they're going to donate or attend one of your events. They actually want to learn a little bit more. So you need to get those 7 touches in. And so a Welcome Series is a great way to start down that path of the 7 touches, but we also want to find other ways to engage with them, and that could be social media, that could be live events, however it is that it could even be phone calls. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well as a way to thank your donors. But any of those touches, the more touches you can get in there, the more likely it is they're going to donate that second, third, and fourth time. We also want to communicate with our supporters and our patrons in the way that they want to be communicated and with the information that they want to hear about. The Community Philanthropy 2.0 survey asks donors, what do you want to hear about more from the organizations that you support? The number 1 thing they want to hear about, organizational impact. What are you doing with the money I gave you? What are you doing to make a difference in the world? What are you doing to make a difference in the community? The number 2 thing they want to hear about is success stories. Now the best way to show organizational impact is with success stories. So you can actually kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You can get their 2 top hot buttons by just telling more stories, which we're going to talk about in a moment here. So we really want to be focusing on almost everything you do. You want to be communicating the impact that you've made or the impact that you have in the community, especially when you're asking for donation dollars. Now it's probably less important when you're getting people to attend an event or an art show or a theater event, something like that. The impact's probably not as important then, but if you are asking for donations, they really do want to know that impact. Now I mentioned success stories. You obviously want to be telling more stories. You know I'm a huge fan of stories if you've been on any of the previous webinars. We've talked about stories on your website. We've talked about stories via email. We've talked about stories in just about everything that you do because they are so powerful. It's exactly what supporters want to hear about. It's a great way to inspire people with your passion. Individual stories are best. They've done a lot of research on this. One of my favorite authors, Dan Ariely, a professor at Duke University, he has a book called Predictably Irrational. You can look him up on Amazon. He did some studies where he looked at malaria as a cause and how different appeals had different success rates. And when they talked about malaria as in the aggregate, talked about millions of people affected and it's this horrible problem affecting all these countries and all these people, they raised X amount of money. When they started telling individual stories of people affected by malaria, donations went up 2 to 3 times, almost instantly, just by telling those individual stories. So you can tell stories about anyone that's in your arts programs, anyone that's been helped or impacted by it. You can tell individual stories about the artists, about the actors, actresses, patrons. You can tell stories about staff members, your staff members, why they do what they do, why are they so involved in the arts community. All of those things let people get to know you, get to know your organization, get to know the work that you do. It's going to create a touch point. It's going to engage them in a much better way than just than not telling stories. And finally, you can also ask people for their stories. We gave an example of this when we did the website talk, where there was a children's theater that was telling stories and was kind of running out of stories to tell. So they just started asking their supporters, what are your stories? Why do you support our organization? Why do you think our organization is cool? And people started submitting their own stories. So you can actually get donors, members, volunteers, all of that. They have stories about why they support you. There's a reason that they pay attention to you. That they probably have these amazing stories that you don't even know about. And so think about if someone reads a story about you, that's one way to engage. But if they tell you about a story about their lives, about why they're affected by your organization, and then you publish that story, tell me that that's not an amazing engagement point. Tell me that's a person that is not that's more likely to become a long-term loyal supporter when you've told their story online. That's going to make them feel special. That's going to actually be a really, really big deal. Next is the thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is one of the best ways to engage with your supporters, and one of the best ways to get them to turn into long-term loyal supporters is the power of the thank you. In a study that I looked at, 21% of donors say they were never thanked, and most only received a generic receipt thank you. So they got the generic thank you that they know that you send out to everybody, and that's just really not cutting it. We're going to talk about some of the research on that in a second. But remember back to our donor retention study, a 10% decrease in attrition. If we go from 60% to 50% attrition, that could be a 200% increase in our projected value. So if we can thank our donors better, that should bring down our attrition rate, because many organizations are not thanking their donors and definitely aren't thanking them in good ways. So what are some good ways to thank your donors? One of my favorite things I like to do is to create a thank you series and thank them multiple times throughout the year. So if you've just finished a big campaign, you've just finished your end of year campaign or some sort of fundraising campaign, and you had a bunch of donors, you of course want to thank them right away. We're going to thank them right away. Try to make that thank you a little different than what most organizations are doing. Put some photos in there, put a video in there from people that have been affected or impacted by the donation. Remember, it's all about that impact. Then what you do is you thank them again in a week to update them on progress. Then thank them again in 3 months, showing them the impact that they've made. Remember, the number one thing they want to hear about is impact, right? So if you follow up with them 3 months later and just say, hey, just wanted to thank you again for all of those end-of-year gifts. Here's what we've been doing so far with that money. And show them a video, show them pictures of the impact that it's making. Is it the arts program, the school arts program, whatever it is, show them the picture, show them the impact that it's making, and then you just keep doing that. You don't even need to ask for money at that point, but the next time you do ask for money, they're going to be much more likely to donate, much more likely to be interested, because you've shown them that their money actually made a difference. This is one of the biggest things you can do to increase your donor loyalty, to increase your long-term sort of loyal donors, and really always focusing on that impact. Now beyond that, if you really want to move the needle, you can actually start thinking about next level thank yous. And a lot of this is coming from the research from Penelope Burke. If you haven't read Donor-Centered Fundraising, and that's the book over on the right side there by Penelope Burke, or looked at her research, the Cygnus, her company Cygnus Research, the Burke Donor Survey. She surveys, I think, over 25,000 donors, maybe it's more than that now, but every year she sends surveys out to donors asking them all these questions about their donation practices. How much did they donate? Could they have donated more? How were they thanked? How would they like to be thanked? And she's coming back with some really interesting information from these. Some of the stats I said earlier is from the Burke survey, where most donors are saying they were thanked with just a very boring, generic sort of letter or email, and it's not what they want. They actually want to be thanked in special ways. So you got to find what are those special ways. And she's finding that one of the best ways to do that is with phone calls. So you can also do handwritten notes, you can do cards from the kids, etc. You want to think about ways to stand out. But apparently phone calls are really doing a great job of moving the needle. And just to think that I want you to think you don't have to do all the phone calls yourselves. Something that has been very effective with organizations I've worked with, and I'm hearing a lot of folks talking about this online now, is having your board make some of these thank you phone calls to your donors. So depending on how many donations you get on an average month, you take the list of your donors, you divide it up among your board members at your next board meeting. So each board member gets like 5, 6 names on the list. You then take 15 minutes out of the board meeting and say, go make your calls, Board members go off into a corner, they call their 5 names. All they're doing is calling them up, thanking them for the donation, letting them know the impact that it's having on your organization, how it's having on the community, maybe telling a story about an individual, and that is it. They don't have to ask for money. They don't have to do anything else. This will help in your fundraising. Even if they're not asking for money on these thank you calls, which they shouldn't be, it will be more likely that these donors will donate a second, third, fourth time because they got thanked in this really real, concrete way. And you'll see some really interesting results. We've actually seen some folks, even though donation wasn't asked for, some folks actually have gone back online and donated a second time because they've never been called by an organization that they supported and told the progress, told the impact, all of that. And that is, we saw what donors want. They're more likely to then donate. So a great way to stand out from the crowd. Now, most of you on the phone probably do a good job with this. You probably do a lot of events. I mean, arts organizations are some of the best at running events. But you also want to be focusing on doing event fundraising. And I see the two as very, very different. You can run events, that's great, but you actually want to run some events that have a fundraising focus. And what I mean by event fundraising, the planning, managing, and execution of an event designed to raise money for an organization. So one, and this is a great way to engage. If you can get people to attend a live event, it has been shown to increase loyalty. People that attend live events are more likely to be your long-term loyal donors. And you'll probably see that when you start analyzing your donor database. When you start analyzing your donor data, you'll see that the long-term supporters that you have are the ones that attend live events because you get that real human connection. Just to show you how powerful event fundraising can be, at Abilla, the company that I'm working for now, we have a product called Abilla Fundraising Online that allows you to do online fundraising as well as event fundraising, event registration and peer-to-peer fundraising and all of that sort of stuff. You can do that online, embed the forms right on your website, etc. So we went and looked at all of our Abilla Fundraising Online customers about a year ago and kind of separated them into 2 groups. One, groups that did event-based fundraising and groups that just did your traditional online campaigns. They put up a donate button and send people and try and get people to donate online versus the folks that really did event fundraising. And we found the difference between these were quite striking. We found the folks that did event-based fundraising raised 890% more money than the folks that did not do event-based fundraising. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. One, we talked about the engagement. I mean, someone comes to a live event, they're going to get to meet you, they're going to get to meet some of your staff, they're going to get to meet some of the other donors. People get really excited. They're part of a community. They are more likely to give. They are more likely to give more than they would if they were just sitting at home on their computer typing into your online donation form. So event fundraising can be a huge, huge difference. And tied to event fundraising is the concept of peer-to-peer fundraising. And we probably haven't talked about this very much in the webinar series so far, but it is something we can talk about in the future if you all would like. So peer-to-peer fundraising is the process of empowering individuals and groups to raise funds on your behalf. Now traditionally, this has been your walks, runs, rides, right? The Komen and Race for the Cure and all of that sort of stuff. It's basically, people sign up for an event and then they start raising funds and they have a personal fundraising page and they send their friends and family to that page and they say, hey, I'm raising money for Komen and I want you to go here and donate, or Ride for the Cure, whatever it is. I jokingly call it blackmail fundraising because we've all seen those emails from our friends and family saying, I'm now raising money for XYZ and you need to donate, and of course you have to go donate or you have to look them in the eye the next time you see them and tell them why you didn't donate. So I do call it blackmail fundraising jokingly, but it can be very, very effective. One, it really increases engagement. If somebody becomes a peer-to-peer fundraiser for you, that is a really high engagement point. That means that they are out there telling their friends and family not only that they care about your organization, but that they should also support. They're kind of vouching for you. They're kind of putting their name next to yours and all that stuff. So we found that it creates a huge connection. Those peer-to-peer fundraisers really become long-term fundraisers, and they actually become peer-to-peer fundraisers year over year over year. There's an organization I worked with on it was a cycling event. And we found that the top fundraisers from the previous years become the top fundraisers for the next year. So we contact them early in the process, we get them excited and joined again, and it's that same group that really does a great job over and over. They've become very, very loyal supporters. It's a great way to engage with millennials. If you're trying to engage better with millennials, this is one way to do it. 71% of millennial donors said that they would do peer-to-peer fundraising. They would raise funds on behalf of an organization that they believed in. So another great way to get them involved without them having to actually donate themselves. They can actually get family to donate, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, people that maybe have more money than the millennials themselves at this point. So peer-to-peer fundraising is another way that you can engage. Finally, you want to be thinking about engaging donors in multiple ways, and this could depend on your organization, this could depend on the type of arts organization you are, but don't always do what you've always done. If you always do what you've always done, you're going to engage the donors in the same way. For instance, think of new ways. So for me, I will never go to a gala. I don't like galas. I don't like getting dressed up. I hate even getting dressed up for work, so I'm definitely not going to go dress up on my time off, right? I don't want to wear a tie and a suit and a black tie and all that stuff. But if you do a beer and barbecue sort of outdoor event with live music, I'm all over that. Like, that's the event that I'm going to go to. So trying to think about different ways to engage with your patrons, your constituents, because you're going to get different people to be involved in different things. So think about live events, volunteering, signing a petition, peer-to-peer, ask them to tell their friends. The more things that you do, the more different things that you can do, the more likely you're going to find the thing that gets that specific person or that individual. That could turn into be a long-time donor. That could turn out to be a major donor down the road. Use your data as your guide. What does your A+ donor look like? And then sort of identify donors that are close to that A+ donor, and then try and get them to move. So you can start grouping them from your donor database. And of course, get them to take those small actions. Those small actions are what will increase engagement. So in conclusion, remember, moves are not just for major donors anymore. We're now looking at moving some of those moves online by grouping and segmenting people and then getting them to move through those processes from Dunlop. The key is donor engagement and donor loyalty. That is our really big goal, not only online but in all fundraising that we do. We want them to be engaged. We want them to be loyal. Always be looking to fill that engagement gap, and that engagement gap, remember, is the gap between a first-time donor and your long-time loyal donors that give you, vast majority of your money. What's that gap between there, and how can you shrink that gap? How can you move those one-time donors over that gap, through that gap, and become those long-term? And as I always say, take one or two strategies from today and take action. Just try them out, test them out, start measuring, tracking, seeing what works, what doesn't work. If you're not already, you can sign up for my email list online if you go to nonprofitrd.com. And from there, we will go into the Q&A portion. If you have any questions, please just type them into the chat box. I'd be more than happy to answer them there, as well as you can connect with me in the different profiles there on the screen. As I said earlier, the recording and the slides will be available from the South Jersey Cultural Alliance website, I believe, on their resources page. I'll probably have these sent over to them probably tomorrow, so they should be available in the next couple of days on the website if you want the recording or the slides. So if you have questions, go ahead and type them in. We did have a couple questions that got, I had a couple questions that got sent in before the session actually started. And if you have other questions, type them into the box. But one of the questions I had sent in asked for, do you have a recommendation for a donor database or a constituent relationship management system? And that is a pretty common question I get. And the bad news is that that's a hard question to answer without knowing more about your organization and who you are and what you're trying to track. That's something where you really want to talk to somebody, talk to other organizations that are similar to yours and ask them what they're using. That's probably the best way to go. Some of your friends in the industry, or if you're a theater, what are other theaters using and all that stuff. The other thing is you can just start trying some different ones out there. There's definitely some resources that you can look up, but it's kind of a hard question to answer without knowing more about your organization. So start with your similar organizations, friends and family out there. And the most important thing is to just start trying to use something. It's better to it's even better to be using Excel spreadsheets than actually no way to track. But you're going to find the Excel spreadsheets are really going to limit you. You really want to look at some sort of a donor database. But if you'd like to talk more about that, you can email me and I can probably point you in the direction of some things. So another question I had is, what if you're not doing moves management at all yet, either online or offline? Where should you start? And that is an excellent question, actually. And this is something, if you're a smaller organization or you're just really getting into kind of the fundraising realm, you maybe haven't even thought about moves management at all. And what I would tell you is, if I was telling a new organization or a smaller organization that wanted to get into moves management, I would start by doing some of the moves management online, because it's going to be a little cheaper to do it online. It's going to be a little easier to do it online. online, and you can use some of the strategies that we talked about earlier today. And if you start building out those donor profiles, if you start building out your donor database, it'll make it much easier to move into the major donor sort of moves management as you start building out those profiles. But there's no reason you couldn't take some of the strategies that we talked about earlier and start implementing those right away. Start tracking it, start getting to know your donors, start building out those donor profiles, and then you'll really start to get excited when you start to see sort of the difference that can make in your fundraising, especially online. Kathy says, thank you, good session. Well, thank you very much, Kathy. I appreciate that. I'm going to look through here. If you have any other questions, type them into the chat box. I'm looking through. I don't think I missed any. No, I'm looking through. No private messages to me. Let me see if anyone did in the QA box. No, we look good. All right, so I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off and stop the recording. Thank you very much for attending today, guys, and looking forward to see you on the next one.